Progress. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited that you're joining us today for, I think this is the third in a series that occurred this week, and a wonderful opportunity to have a roundtable, a conversation, a thought leadership opportunity through ATP, especially with the education division. I'm Debi Crimmins. I'm the vice chair for the ATP Ed division, and I have the honor of working side by side with Jesse. I believe some of you joined him on Monday for our language roundtable, and with Walt as our secretary. I believe he was security yesterday. We're so excited to be part of the ATP family and be able to really focus on the education division. When we think about this specifically, assessment, credentialization, workforce readiness, all of the pieces that connect, it really is a journey. It's really a pathway. It really stems from, the K-12 learning through school into the careers, into the world. And I'm so excited about this discussion today because I have amazing partners in crime. I have amazing friends. I have amazing experts that are joining me as we rethink credentialing for workforce readiness. And, as you're joining today, we would love if we could have everybody come on camera and off mute and interact with us because that's how we all learn best. But we also know that that would be a little distracting. So just as a little bit of a housekeeping, we're going to encourage all of you to interact with us as much as you can through the Q&A. You'll be able to see each other's comments, and we'll be looking down into that little button ever so often to make sure that we're connecting with you as much as possible. We want this to be an authentic conversation, one of many that we hope to have sponsored by the Ed Division as we move forward. I thought about the topic today and why I'm so passionate about it, because I think we're always focusing on being lifelong learners, and we're always really thinking about what that journey feels like and how, as we go through a pathway, whether that be the CTE that we've known growing up, right, or the reimagined CTE. When you think about, that kind of what does that career prep look like? What do those technical pieces feel like? How do you get the credentializations, the experience? How do you build for all of our learners as they go out into the universe to participate in that workforce of the future? And today we thought we'd really focus on some big ideas. So I'm going to set the stage before I introduce my fantastic panel. Really thinking about if tomorrow's workforce is the theme, how do we think of the role of credentialing, and how do we bridge credentialing when it comes to education and employment? The days are changing, right? I bet we all could share how differently we have really experienced learning and the application of learning and content and what it means to apply what we're learning in school to our careers and to our futures. We'll also look at assessment, especially if we think about building that workforce of tomorrow, what that means from an equity perspective and an access perspective and opportunity. All things I know that we're all passionate about, not only for those of you joining us, but especially for the panel that is with me today. AI, we can't do anything without talking a little bit about AI, right? So we'll think about AI or just emerging technologies and how does that help make us, a little bit more, thoughtful about what a career pathway might be. And we'll be organic about this. We'll look at topics that might come up in the Q&A. In fact, before I do the introduction of the panel, I wonder if you might take a second as you are attending and joining us today and put kind of in that Q&A something that you hope we focus on today when it comes to kind of reimagining the CTE world or thinking about workforce readiness. And as I do the introductions, I'll kind of keep my eye on the Q&A and perhaps engage with our audience, as we so much appreciate that you're joining us today. So I couldn't do this without the folks that are here today. When I say thought leadership panel, this is a thought leadership panel. Folks that, for all of the ideas that we just talked about and the purpose of this, really represent this so much. First and foremost, and it's to my left, so we won't make sure we're all doing the Brady Bunch, but is Dr. Arsenio Romero. Dr. Romero is the former state superintendent of public instruction for New Mexico. He leads with heart. So I just have to say that I have been very blessed to participate in many engagements that Dr. Romero is part of. He focused so much on equity and innovation and workforce readiness. His idea about CTE and what it could be always is about the future and really building on what always has been the past, but integrating AI, thinking about bilingual, thinking about the opportunity to really drive community, drive impact. And he is just, someone who's just the perfect person to have this dialogue with today. I also have Dr. Andrew Ordover, and Andrew's the Vice President of Global Education and Talent Development at Prometric, but he spent a lifetime in really looking at what education means for students, how that really supports talent development for children, and as they become young adults and adults, how that plays in education systems and assessment systems and content systems, and how we really think about what that CTE credentialing and badging and workforce trends could be. And he's done this globally. He is really thinking about, we were just on talking a little bit about work that he's doing in India and really thinking about how this workforce readiness is a global focus, not just a North America focus. And finally, last but not least, is Amanda Jewell. Amanda Jewell is our Vice President of Assessment Design. She is our expert at Prometric when it comes to data and assessment and how to make that very real, very applicable. She leads assessment design, development strategy. She's always looking for evidence-based best practices, really using data to drive credentialization to support the workforce. We were teasing Amanda a little because she's just returned from travels in Zambia, where she was working with entire groups of people to think about redesigning workforce of the future and what that looks like. So I've got a stellar group. Like I said, so glad that we've got folks that are joining. I see a couple questions in the chat already, things to think about before we start, and just thinking about K-12 institutions and universities. How do we create the bridge? Wow, Arsenio, if that doesn't set you up perfectly, I don't know what does. How do we help with building the funnel, right? And then we'll look a little bit deeper. I see another one about micro-credentialing and badging. And I think Andrew and Amanda, you can help us to think about that and reimagine that a little bit, because sometimes I don't know that we're always so aware of what that means. So Arsenio, let's start with you, because I think this is just a perfect way to think about what we're talking about when we're talking about kind of that workforce of tomorrow. State of New Mexico, Department of Education, many schools, many children, right? Many leaders that you've worked with. You've seen a lot of evolution. I know you have. How have you seen CTE evolving in your work and the work that you've done, and not only just locally, especially with New Mexico, but really globally, and things that you're seeing around the country and around the world?
No, wonderful. First, just thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to be talking about this. This is something that is so impactful for every student across the planet. But if I think about my world in New Mexico, this is going to be very similar no matter where you're at, where you're listening to today. So again, just being in this industry in K-12 education for the last 30 years, I've seen it change a lot. Even from when I was a student to where we're at today, even over the last 5 years, the last year, it has tremendously changed. So one of the challenges we have as educators in K-12 is we have these 5-year-olds that come in as kindergartners. And the first challenge is that we're trying to prepare them for a world and an industry in where many jobs haven't even been created
That's
yet.
right.
And
That's
so
right.
we're just getting ready. We're trying to figure out how do we support them the best we can. As they go through elementary into middle school, we want them to be exposed to as many types of industry as possible. So when you think about New Mexico, and many of you are going to relate to this, we've got urban areas, but we also have very rural areas. And so if you are coming, for example, from a rural agricultural area, what do you know? You're going to know what it's like living on a farm. You're going to know what
Right.
it's like, growing and working with cattle and being in small towns. But you may be the next person that is going to become an astronaut or a scientist or
Absolutely.
working with data. So how do
Hmm.
we get them to start to really get experiences with those things? That's where we see CTE type of opportunities working in environments as early as kindergarten. We always thought about it as being high school courses and
Hmm.
connections with university type of relationships, but that's not really the case anymore. So now we think about how are we going to prepare them for graduation and getting into the workforce. And in the past, it's always about getting that diploma, and that's so important, right? We
Right,
want them to be
right.
able to get that diploma, go on
Hmm.
and be just pillars of their community.
Hmm.
But I've always said that if we're only graduating students with diplomas, we're already doing a disservice to them. We need to
Wow.
be able to set up environments where they're not just graduating with a diploma, but they're also leaving with us either in multiple different things that are all possible right now, where they're
Hmm.
graduating with a diploma, but they can also
Hmm.
be graduating with multiple dual credits, so they're already on the pathway for higher education, or they have the ability to be able to go directly in the workforce through credentialing, through certifications. And that's why this is so important, where they can go right in and they are already so experienced and being able to contribute to the communities. And the last thing I want to add to that too is it is so possible now because these are set up in K-12 systems across the country to be able to not graduate just with that diploma, but also speaking multiple languages, because that is what we do. That's what we need across the globe. And so these are all possibilities. And that's the hard part right now, is that it shouldn't just be a possibility now. It should be the standard. And when we
Yeah,
think
I
about,
love that. Yes.
yeah, just what's hard about this is that we can't think of this as just electives anymore. They have to
Hmm.
be able to set this up so that every student, no matter who you are, has this possibility of making this a reality.
It almost redefines education as we know it. Like, so you're imagining the possibilities. All right, we're career, technical education, whatever you want to call it, right? At CTE reimagined, but that it feels like you said, the diploma is just one piece,
Right.
and there's so many other possibilities that we could add to that. And I think as we talk credentials and we talk what that means to reimagine the workforce of tomorrow, I'm also really excited, honestly, that HEP has an education division as we
Right.
start to look at how do you learn more about these credentials? How do you learn more about how assessment plays into these cohorts that we're building of folks going off into the workforce and having the skills they need right from college? I mean, Andrew, you've always been working on that kind of focus, like really making sure that that application is well beyond the school walls.
Well, beyond the school walls and then bringing it into the school, right? Because Arsenio said it can't just be electives, but there's only so
Mhm.
many hours in the school day. And I think one of the challenges that I see some schools trying to embrace, but it's tricky to do it, is to weave the academics and the career exposure together. So it's not just decontextualized abstract math over here, and then, oh, let's talk about some industries in your state over here.
Mhm.
But can you have an experience of geometry in the idiom of different kinds of industries? What does math mean when you're in finance? What does it mean when you're in the arts? It means
Right.
something when you're in the arts. And if we can weave the two of them together, then you don't have to cram more in. You make them
Mhm.
all, you make
It
all the
isn't
academics more relevant
isn't
to
that
the
the
kids on the
question, right?
career
You always
path.
get, when will I use this? When will I use this, right? And so what you're actually thinking about is, as we think about this workforce readiness, it's bringing it into the school as well. That's a really good point. All right, I got to do my teacher wait time, right?
Well, and Debbie, I was
I was
thinking,
going to say, Amanda, you got to help us with the credentialing. What and
well, I was just thinking too about, I was pulling up a quote that I had seen last week at a conference, and it really solidifies what Arsenio and Andrew were saying. It was the greatest failure of teaching is not when students fail exams, but it's when they pass exams and fail life. And
oh,
I
wow.
I took a picture of it because I thought that is so true. And we are finally focusing on preparing students for life. So whether that means in mathematics that you're showing them the applications of that and the
Mhm.
why they do need to use it, but also acknowledging possibly, I mean, I'm a former mathematics teacher, so I can say like acknowledging that some of the upper level math a lot of people aren't ever going to use. And so
Right,
do we need to
right.
be focusing all that when we could be presenting them with life skills?
Yeah.
Anyways, I just thought that that was a really
Well, you're
supportive.
going to have to share that with all of us because I saw all of us go like this because we would use that, as we think about the workforce of tomorrow and making sure that students are graduating, it's being successful in life. That's such a powerful piece. We had a question in the Q&A that I think kind of goes to this, and let me read this one. And so if this is kind of the focus right now, if we start to think about what that bridge looks like for workforce needs, and I don't know, maybe Amanda, you know how to kick us off on this, or it could be Andrew as well. Patrick asks about micro-credentialing and badging. Like, how do those pieces fit in? What are those pieces if you're new to it? I feel like we're with clients and customers and partners all day long, and there's varying levels of understanding of what those pieces are in building kind of the workforce of tomorrow.
Andrew, do you want to take this or do you want me to?
Why don't you start if you have a thought about it?
Okay, I think that a lot of organizations are really starting to investigate this, how they,
Yes.
whether they want to use badging, stacked credentials, micro
Right.
credentials. There's so many terms that are out there right now, and really how to clearly define and what that means for their organization, but really trying to do stepping stones so that they can prepare students, candidates,
Yes.
with the little skills, and not little, they're not insignificant, but
Right.
bite-sized pieces where you can show
Oh, okay. Hmm.
competency in a
Hmm.
particular skill. So you may have a credential in something to do with healthcare or finance,
Hmm.
education,
Hmm.
automotive.
Hmm.
But you also then want to show that you have competency in, say, communication, or
Hmm.
competency in adaptability, or in some sort of durable skill on top of that. And so you can
Hmm.
start to stack those badges and credentials to really um, show you as the full individual. And I think that that's really what organizations are looking at, is that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, that you
Right.
can really start to show pieces of progression as you're along the continuum of learning
Hmm.
along the way.
I
And
think
I'll,
you're
along with
that,
what I was,
well, hold on one second, Andrew, and let me please add on to that. I thought that description really kind of set the stage for us. That's good. I think sometimes we don't really understand what a credential could mean in addition
Mhm.
to a diploma. And sorry to interrupt you, Andrew. Go
No,
for
no.
it.
And even pre-credential, I know one of the things high schools are trying to do is and I mentioned this before, is they're trying to think about how to bring their CTE standards into their academic standards so things aren't just additive. And so what a
Hmm.
lot of them are trying to do is think about curriculum pathways, which is
Hmm.
tricky because if you're going to have 6 different industry pathways or 7 or even start with 3, does that
Right.
mean you have to have 3 different American literature classes running? Or
Oh,
can you
wow.
differentiate
Hmm.
your instruction and somehow serve your curriculum through the lens of these different pathways in one classroom? So it's
Hmm.
challenging, and I don't know that anyone's done it right or perfectly, but I know what they're trying to do even before you get to discrete credentials is trying to give kids more access to academic content and academic skills
Hmm.
in through the lens of the thing they're interested about in the world, even if they don't have a particular job in mind or they're changing. They just
Right.
know, like, I'm in this world, I want to do something in sports management, recreation,
Hmm.
something in that world.
Hmm.
And that's a pathway. It doesn't have to be a job or an industry, but it's a broad pathway that you could experience your curriculum through.
What a
And that's an interesting
great
stepping
visual.
stone,
That's a
even
great
into
visual.
higher ed or
Yes.
directly into the workforce.
Yes. Arsenio, I saw you jumping in there. I know you
Yeah,
are.
if I can add, because I think this is just a powerful conversation that we're having and I love the question because it's asking about the bridge between K-12 20 and the workforce. And so there's responsibilities from all those parties involved. When we think about K-12 education, you've got universities, the four-year institutions, you've got the community colleges, and then you've got the partnerships around you with the industry. And so when I listen to Amanda and talking about the credentialing, we have to first define what are those credentials. And this is a really good place to be, because what's been hard sometimes is when K-12 education is working with universities and the industry partners, we're trying to decide, well, what do they need experiences with? And many times it's like, well, okay, we've got hooked up with this great partnership, but it's not okay for them to just be answering phones or going through the mail. That's not what
Right.
we want their experiences to be. And when we actually define what those credentials are, it helps all parties involved. And so
Mhm.
we're having to address what that means on CTE side in classes, just like what Andrew was talking about, how it connects to the learning process and the standards. But on the industry side, it really allows them to go, okay, this is a student that's under
Mhm.
18 years old, and that kind of restricts some of the things we can and can't do, but it starts allowing for conversation about what they can have access to, what kind of experiences they can have, and does it meet the needs of what those credentials are. And so it just
Mhm.
helps that relationship across the board.
Definitions on a pathway, definitions on a badge, and what that means. I think, Amanda, I finally understand it myself. Like, it's not small, but they're bite size. It's the skills specifically that are going to help you along that pathway. We rethink how we're going through the education system almost, and what does that look like today. It sounds like, and I hope we're not going off on a too different of a direction, but we're also talking about the possibility that this all brings for equity. And, I know equity is important to each one of you. And, we could start with anyone, but I think equity as the center of this, how does this type of learning, this reimagining of credentialization help make sure that there's opportunities for all? I know, Arsenio, you started with that a little bit about no matter where you live or what your zip code might be or what your experience is, the opportunity to have reach. I wonder if you would expand on the equity topic a little bit.
Huge. That's it. I mean, that's really what this is all about. And so whether
Mhm.
you are a student coming from urban environment or a very rural environment, what this does is it provides accessibility and allows you to be portable with your learning. And so you're able to go anywhere with this now. And that's what's amazing. So I want you to kind of picture New Mexico and what this looks like for us, because it's going to relate to wherever you're listening to from now. We have 23 tribes, nations, and pueblos. In many of these communities, there is still not running water or electricity, but these students have so much to be able to give, and we want to be able to not one allow them to get skills so they can build in their own community, but also have
Mhm.
access to the rest of the world. And so when we have these kinds of partnerships with K-12 education, with
Mhm.
universities, and with industry, it allows so much. And also, Debbie, you talked about AI. You talked about the new technologies that are out there. I mean, let's talk about green energy. Let's talk about data service centers that are out there, but also
Mhm.
using resources, because there are a limited amount of resources that are out there. And we're all going to
Mhm.
be kind of jockeying for how these things are going to fit into these worlds. These students we're talking about now, they're the ones that are going to solve all those questions. And so it is so important that we give them the resources, the experiences, and the relationship building power now so that they can do that.
Well, and you went there with the AI piece. I can't even imagine some of the students I taught so many decades ago and all the things I want them back for now, because I can almost reimagine what curriculum could be and should look like, how we would think about durable skills and standards, and what does that mean for life readiness and workforce readiness, and how is technology and assessment and a lot of the pieces, quite honestly, that we're tackling with the HEP Ed Division all the time about how do we tap into this with always the human potential, but take advantage of the technology that we have right now to make sure that pathway, that learning journey is as robust and rich as it can be. You probably have that too. You want your kids back. You want to do it again. I want all the things I would do differently, right? Andrew, you have seen lots of designs across the country, across the world, international models. Are some things that we should be paying attention to when it comes to this type of CTE modeling or credentialing? And don't mean to put you on the spot, but sometimes people want to know kind of where to start or who to look to or how to begin.
Well, Amanda was talking about durable skills, and when we're thinking broadly, not specifically, like I know exactly
Mhm,
what I want to be, and I have to
mhm,
go take this test to get this job. When we're talking
mhm.
about CTE and exploration, it really is about building broad, flexible skills that you could take anywhere. And that's not
Right.
just for kids, right? Because we have a lot of mid-career people, especially in this economy, who need to change. Their job
Mhm,
disappeared or their
mhm.
industry disappeared. And so,
Yeah,
what are the flexible skills that they need to be able to take them to any kind of job? And the
right.
interesting thing is that you can see these kinds of durable skills, or they call them soft skills. The same kind of list shows up again and again. You see it in state level CTE standards. You see it in frameworks like 21st Century Skills or Castle Social Emotional Learning. You can see it in habits of mind. It comes under a lot of different places. Even some of
Right.
these new state level profile of a high school graduate schemes. If you go to
Hmm.
Battelle for Kids, you can see all these badges from different districts that are starting these profile of a graduate things. And it tends to be all the same words. It's adaptability and resilience and communication and creativity. And if you broaden the lens to look internationally, you do see some of the same things. UNESCO has a framework. They have an interesting framework because they break it into core values.
Mm.
Any employee of any industry should embrace these values to be a good, successful employee. And then core competencies, the kinds of skills that will make you a good employee anywhere. And then managerial skills. I'd never seen it broken up that way, and that's kind of interesting. And the OECD also has their set of standards. I can't remember the name of it. I just lost it somewhere. The interesting thing is, though, when we try to map the ones we're familiar with here to some of theirs, it's not always a one-to-one correspondence. It's messy because you may see
Interesting.
something
Yeah.
like self-management in Castle, and you try and
Hmm.
map that, that'll map to something sense of responsibility in UNESCO, or maybe self-efficacy in OECD, and it may
Hmm.
not. It's going to depend on the context of like
Hmm.
what you mean by that. And to me, context is where these get really messy. Because when we
Hmm.
talk about adaptability, and we think about, well, how do I teach that and assess it, but not in the context of a particular industry, just by itself, I don't know that we know what that means or that we agree on what that means when it's
Right.
decontextualized from academics outside a subject area, outside an industry, and not even in a particular region. I don't mean in France or in Europe. I just mean anywhere. What does
Right.
critical thinking mean when you're not talking about a particular thing to think critically about? And so when we're trying to build these systems to sort of assess and credentialize, like we don't have rubrics for that. We haven't decided what mastery means, or even if we can figure out what it means generically. So there's a lot
Mhm.
of work to do in that area to figure out how to support these things better.
Yeah, I love that you were just providing some examples. I saw some folks asking for that. We'll provide that list maybe in the follow-up after this because I think people are looking where to begin. I think Arsenio, you have been working on this in New Mexico. I feel like you were telling us the story once about the graduation, and it's not just the diploma now that they're graduating with. So tell us a little bit how that looks for you all as you're looking at those durable skills.
To the question about how do you start, when we think about K-12 education, we were really limited to Perkins funding. This was federal funding that came in.
Right.
Very grateful for that funding, but it was limited. We can only do a little bit at a time, and so sometimes it took years, if not decades, to really get CTE programs going. And what we found in New Mexico is we have to just jump right into it, and it's not just K-12 schools, but it's everybody. And so what we've had to do is really work with our state legislators. This has got to be
Right.
state funded and reoccurring funds that happen. We also have to work with universities so that we have these pathways and these connections and relationships with our universities, but also with foundations
Mm-hmm.
and entities like that can help us raise money. So it's really about braiding these funds to be able to make all this happen. Because if you don't think that way, where you're using multiple funding sources, it'll take you forever to take a couple of steps forward. But if you really
Right.
want to take some giant leaps forward, you've got to get everybody involved. So whether your industry, whether you're K-12 education universities, have those relationships with your with your executive branches and your legislative branches to start to develop ways to be able to get that funding so it's reoccurring on and on and on. And that's the way to really make this happen.
That almost makes the innovation have its pathway of its own, right? Because you have to, as you're thinking about the funding, as you're thinking about the participants, the models kind of backing into all. And what I liked that I heard all of you say is that, when we think about this, this is multiple groups. When you reimagine this is not just your schools or your colleges or your associations and organizations that have been part of ATP for such a long time. But I also like that you've talked about really thinking about foundations and connecting with the community-based piece of this. And this becomes a real dialogue then. This idea is not just a school thing. It's not even the ed division thing. It's really about, taking assessment and credentialization and what we have now at our fingertips with technology and assessment and doing something perhaps different than it's ever been done before and looking to have models. I think, Amanda, you're almost our go-to on this sometimes. You're talking with organizations and associations and employers all the time. Andrew touched on Arsenio. I think we all did. Are you hearing about certain skills that people are saying they need most urgently? I think about clients I've been with in the last 2 weeks, and to your point, whether they're automotive or they're financial or even actuary. I think of the groups that I've been working with, and what are you hearing? What are they wanting most that can really be kind of reflected now in a CTE credential?
Well, I think the exciting part is that the stakeholders are all really getting involved now. I think that we're not just looking at K-12, higher ed, employers. Everybody
Right.
is hyper aware of the need to connect and to build these bridges between all of these, because the higher ed isn't everybody's pathway.
Right.
And
Right.
so what are the skills coming right out of high school that will get you into the workforce and get you successful in your goals? Or if you're in higher ed, what are those? What we're really hearing a lot about that is the common thread is really, as Andrew touched on, those durable skills and
Mhm.
really making sure across whatever pathway you choose to go into, that you have communication skills, that you're adaptable, that
Mhm.
you can de-escalate conflict.
Right.
Whether you're in the automotive industry or you're in healthcare, you have to have some type of quote bedside manner. So
Right.
regardless of
Right.
who you're communicating with, you need to have these skills. And so a lot of the organizations that we're working with are really seeing the value of that and the need not only to use it formatively and to as a training technique, but also as a formal assessment to say, again,
Amazing.
we feel that you have these skills, that you can sit across the counter from someone and be empathetic towards them when they're having financial issues or
Mhm.
again, car trouble, or you
True.
have to talk to them about health care, that
Mhm.
you have these skills of empathy and not that you've just read about them. It's very
Mhm.
easy to read about the way you should or should not
Right.
react to
Right.
somebody. When you
Right.
have to actually practice these skills, and so
Mhm.
you get that muscle memory, so to speak, that
Mhm.
okay, this might be an uncomfortable situation for me, but I know I've done it before and I
Right.
know what the right thing is to say and the right tone to use.
Right.
It makes all the difference. And I think in particular in our, sorry, I'm not taking a breath here, but in particular in our K-12, or 9-12, really educating, teaching, training our students about this. When
Yes.
when their eyes are on electronics most of the day, they're not keep putting them up and communicating all that. So I think
Right.
we're finding a spot here where there's a lot of need, both from industry, again, higher ed, as well
Yeah.
as the new graduates, that we're doing a disservice to our students if we
Yeah.
aren't preparing them with these skills.
It's
And
so it's so
Debbie,
true.
I think there's a stepping stone to all of this that we leave out that touches on what Amanda and Arsenio talked about, because so many of these durable skills yes, you need them to be successful in a job. You also just need them to be successful as a person, as an adult. They're adulting skills.
Absolutely.
And there's a community investment in those skills that we leave out sometimes, that the academics go straight to college or the
Right.
workplace stuff goes straight to a job, but the neighborhood matters too.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
so much of what Arsenio was talking about was about sort of centering the school as essential to the life of the community instead of being on a campus
Mm-hmm.
far away from the community where you just
Mm-hmm.
shunt kids off and you don't have to worry about them. And I don't, you know, there's a lot more we could do with that, I think. I was teaching in Czechoslovakia years and years ago in a little town, and in their small town, what they did to graduate their students, they didn't do standardized tests. They did little performances. And
Wow.
the whole town got invested. Everyone got dressed up in suits and ties. The parents brought food for all the teachers and a lot of vodka. And the kids had to stand and deliver. They would, for whatever the subject was, they did a graduation demonstration. They had to answer questions
Wow.
from a panel of adults. Some were teachers, but
Right.
some were just adults from the community. And you had to
Wow.
show as a rite of passage that you could walk the walk and talk the talk as an adult member of your community and pass the test by other adults whose company you'd be joining. And I
Wow.
think that's a really vital piece of that transition into whatever the next step is going to be, that we need to find ways of investing our communities in the life of the school to make real for our kids.
Yeah, talk about reimagining competency-based education. I mean, that's right there, like really looking at the connections amongst everyone and how you can give feedback through an assessment and evaluation. I'm sure there was a rubric and quality indicators and degrees of proficiency, and but the idea that, that whole next step to the workforce of tomorrow was part of the whole community, the whole learning. I really I had to be reflective, Amanda, when you were talking because my daughter graduated recently and is now in the workforce, and she did not have the some of the training, and she's talked about it with me that she needed to work in small groups, to work to deal with group-based projects, and you would think that maybe she did experience that throughout college and throughout high school, but not specifically how to have that conflict resolution or come to a consensus on a group project or a deadline, or how to, look at and dig deep on some of those durable skills. And we talk about it a lot, things that you might could read, people that she talks to, because they weren't specifically taught, or not just taught, to your point, assessed. Like it would have been really great if that type of feedback and assessment had occurred so that she could fine tune that as she goes into her future. So, I could keep you guys all day. I got one more biggie, and then I need to make sure I'm going to check our Q&A again. And I think I've got everything right now. But this one was up. This one was at the beginning that people were talking about too, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. AI and technology, and kind of, we've talked about the power of assessment. We've talked about the pathway that happens from the school to the college to the community to the workforce, everybody, associations together. Now we've got all this technology at our hands, and AI and virtual, and the way that we create assessments, the way that we grade assessments. What are you all, and I just opened this up, what are you seeing? What are you thinking that's going to help to do this type of work, not just for, our K-12, our K-20, kind of pathway, but for everybody? And it doesn't have to be a specific tech, but just in general.
Well, let me maybe just first start by saying, that we are seeing something extremely transformative in K-12 education right now, education in general. This is going to change the way we do things. And of course, every time that happens, it's scary because the
Yes.
technology is happening so fast. When we think about the first versions of AI and then what's come out just in the last couple of weeks, that's already, light years ahead. And so teachers, well, we're used to textbooks. We're used to we had to get used to calculators. We had to get used to the internet. Now we're getting used to
The
AI.
internet, that's right, the
Right.
internet.
And so, what happens? Well, our first instinct is, well, students are cheating and they're using it in improper ways. And so their classroom teachers are learning how to use this, but not only for student learning, but also in their own profession. What is it like if you're a school principal? How can you use AI? If you're a school superintendent, if you are
Yes.
a secretary of education, what does that look like? And so there is some wonderful ways in which this is making our jobs much more efficient. So we're using our time to really improve teaching and learning in the classroom instead of these tasks that take a long time. But we're also having to learn about how data is used, how we're
Yes.
collecting data, how we keep it secure, how we're making sure that we are not getting into situations where we can do harm in some of these things. And so these
Right.
are all learning experiences that whether you're a student in a high school, or whether you are running a school or running a school district, it's a learning experience for all of us. And so, but AI is helping us improve learning outcomes for students across the board.
I can't imagine when we didn't have it a little bit like and I
Oh,
I don't mean it to sound because it makes me and the work that I do think differently about the work that I do or the things that I didn't even know to think about. We were just on with some clients that are overseas in the UK, and they were looking at how do they take all kinds of data in their schools, all attendance data, you name it, of course, assessment data, but to build, to your point, Andrew, that kind of that profile of not just the graduate, the profile of a learner, and how do they take all that data and use technology to do better instruction, have better professional learning communities, better professional development, create better assessments. And that's a conversation that I think is now happening regularly. It doesn't mean we have all the answers, but we're almost thinking about how do we tap into some of this and use it for good. I know, Amanda, you must see this a lot when it comes to the assessment world. What are you seeing from that AI perspective and how it's kind of changing the way we think about assessment and education?
Well, I think to Arsenio's point, it's touching every aspect of everything we do and
Right.
every person we work with. I think back to the workplace and the K-20 learner, I think what is really exciting is that there are AI technologies now that can match your individual skill set, your abilities, uh, your interests, your geographic location and desired location, and can match you with potential workplace
Right.
opportunities. That's something that I think would have been not nearly impossible, but very difficult to do. But
Mhm.
there are the capabilities now where I can say, here's my resume, here's my
Right.
high school diploma, this is the
Right.
CTE work I've done, here are the badges I have. I would love to work in Europe, or I would love to stay in New Mexico. And
Right.
while I go to bed at night, these tools can search for every job potential
Unbelievable.
match. They can
Yeah.
also say to me, you know what, you are this close to being qualified for this job. If you just do this one extra thing, this is what you could do. These are things that bring opportunity to everyone. And it doesn't mean that you have to be wanting to move around the world, but it
Right.
gives you access to be able to, if that's what you want to, or to be able
Right.
to really empower your own community. And so I think that these are the ways that AI is really enabling just transformative power amongst our students, our candidates, and again, not to mention everybody in between.
Yeah, it's humbling. It's humbling. You think about the job searches we each probably could share that we went on our lifetime, and that this is now maybe the way we look at these things and what technology is helping us to do. Andrew, I know you were going to jump in.
Well, I think building on what Amanda talked about, we talked about shareable badges, and that's kind of fun and cute. But I don't think we've even scratched the surface of of the stackable credentials and shareable badges, what that technology allows. Because the
Mm,
badge isn't just a little GIF that you share somewhere.
right.
It's got this train of metadata that's provenance, just like a painting has provenance that shows who owned it through the years to prove that it was actually painted by the person.
Wow.
And there's a really interesting world in which this kind of credentialing can be a real threat to institutions and an opportunity
Mm,
to break open the whole idea of expertise,
hmm.
because there's a world in which anybody could credential someone as an expert.
Right.
You could take guitar lessons with a rock star and they could say,
Hmm.
there, I've blessed you. You got a special badge from me.
Hmm.
And there is technological data showing that that person taught you and assessed you 5 years ago.
Wow.
Right. And that's, credentialing only matters if you can rely on the expertise of the person who gave you that stamp of approval.
True.
And we've
True.
never really had that. We have
Hmm.
institutions as a stand-in for it. I got a
Hmm.
degree from this university. I got the degree. You have no idea who taught me or what I
Interesting.
learned. You just know
Interesting.
that the
Yeah.
reputation of the college stands in for that. And the same thing with the high schools. But now I think students have a way of pursuing the standards they need and building the skills they need in a much more diffuse way and stacking those Lego pieces of the skills in very unique ways across a school so that, English 101 doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing for every kid every year. Even if
Right.
you had to say it's the same standards, the kids could be assembling their skills and the way they demonstrate them in different career ways in very individual ways that then makes it so much more exciting to say, let me use the AI to show all these things I've earned and demonstrated
Yeah.
and apply them to show the world who I am and what I can do.
Andrew, I wish I was in your classroom in Czechoslovakia. I'm telling you what, it's like a living portfolio that you just like it's a portfolio of everything that you've done and you've learned and what the opportunities that might do for you. And it's just such an amazing time to be part of that type of learning. And Arsenio, I want to let you close out too. And I know that you're seeing lots of things with the technology, right?
Absolutely. And I really I want to really hit on a point that you made, Debbie, is this idea of personalized learning. And that's what's
Mm,
amazing. We've always strived that and really talked to parents about how we can personalize learning. AI makes that not just possible, but happen right now.
yeah.
When we're able
Yeah.
to take as many data points as we can, looking at the curriculum, looking at the state standards, looking at the pathways in CTE and the relationships we have with universities and industry, we can chart a path from the moment they come in as 3 and 4 year olds to help them stay on that path. And not only do that in large increments like year by year, so first grade, second
Yeah.
grade, third grade, but we can start to do that even day by day. And what's amazing is with assessments, of course, you think about a test, you think about common formative assessments, you think about those questions, and those are all great. But we're also with AI able to look at how students are looking, how they're reacting to things, what are their verbal cues, and all these things even that make it that much more personalized so that we can keep them on track. And let's not even get into, well, let's get into it. What happens with students when it comes with special needs? We can
Right.
give them opportunities that they've never had before because AI can help
Oh,
us really make that
yes.
that make that
Yes,
possible.
yes, yes. Arsenio, we got a next thought leadership panel.
There
We're
you
gonna
go.
gather that on that. You're so right. I think all the times that all of us were told to individualize instruction and teach to the individual needs of students. And, especially if you had 35, 42 students looking at you, and no matter how much you wanted to do that, I walked out of college with a secondary degree in English education as a bachelor's degree. And I don't know that I was ever taught how to individualize instruction for the variability of levels that I had in that classroom. And when I say I want my students back, I want my students back for some of those very reasons you just described, to almost know how to understand what they needed and understand what that gap might have been or where they were already performing with complete mastery. And it would have changed and could have changed how I grouped or how I did instructional assessment. And we could go on and on. I wish that I could keep you guys all day, and I wish I could keep our group who had attended. I see you all are still here. What a compliment and an honor that you've been able to stay with us and interact with us, even if not as organically as we'd like. But there are ways that you can. And so before I let everyone go, I've got to do my public service announcement because this is really near and dear to my heart. I started this thought leadership discussion with the introduction of ATP and the education division, and how much I'm honored to be part of the growth of that group and to serve as the vice chair and to serve alongside of Jesse, that some of you know as our wonderful chair that has led us through so many growing things this year, and Walt has been our secretary. We have a desire, especially for the folks who are attending today, to keep connected with us, to stay connected with us. We all have very busy day jobs. It's hard to find the time, but this conversation, I think, really represents how ATP is about assessment and education and associations and the schools and the communities and the organizations. It's the connected piece, and there's many ways for you to get involved. And I hope you don't mind if I kind of call out a couple of them. We'd love for you to respond back to us. We're going to be sending you a thank you email. We'll note some of the resources that perhaps Andrew mentioned today. Some of you are asking about those, and ways for you to be involved. And maybe there's topics that you'll want on the next thought leadership that we offer. We're looking for some help in the leadership perspective. Our fearless chair is going to be moving into his next journey, and I will be moving into a new journey as the chair, and our secretary will be moving into vice chair. And we would love to ask for you to consider running for that secretary officer position that will open in January, and we'll get you more information on that. How about your expertise? I can see that we've got a very diverse group of people that are here today, which is so wonderful because it is a cross section of associations, organizations, assessment, credentialization, and even all of our K-20 constituents. We'd love for you to be part of one of these panels, one of these thought leadership discussions, one of these projects, and we would love to hear back from you in ways that you think we could keep improving the way we stay connected as an organization. A lot of you will be at number 3 at ATP in March, right? In New Orleans. You were New Orleans. Yep. I'm trying to remember. I think it is New Orleans. I can't keep track of this, but come join us for our education division luncheon. We had a packed house last year. We were blessed to have Dr. Romero as part of our kind of Q&A while we ate and while we talked. And we'd love to see you and meet you in person, and really look at the year ahead and to figure out how we can plan coffee chats, where we might look at doing some white papers together, especially on AI and credentialization, really ways for all of us to stay connected. This means so much to all of us, because I think the more that we can drive impact as an organization with ATP, we're making, I love lifelong learners. I think Amanda said it and Andrew said it and Arsenio, like, how does this all come together so that this really is about continued lifelong learning? So we'll be following up with an email. Thank you, and ways to get involved. We encourage you to join us for the Education Division luncheon in March. We'll get more information out to you on that. Would love, love, love to have somebody who was interested in becoming part of the ATP leadership team. Look into that if that fits into your schedule. And especially as we start to think about CTE and credentialing and white papers, collaborative research, we're looking for some folks to be actively involved with us. And we'd be honored if you had the time to do that. Most importantly, big thank yous to my friends and my colleagues here today. One of the greatest joys is getting time to spend with people who you're just so passionate about talking about big things and important things with. And this certainly is the group. To Arsenio and to Andrew and to Amanda. I'm not kidding. We could have kept you for another whole hour. I don't think we got to half the questions, and we tried to get to the questions in the Q&A. And we hope that you will join us for the Ed Division luncheon in March if you can. And we hope that you'll join us for another roundtable very, very soon. Thank you guys so much. And thank you all. Have a great day.